Hey, good friends, let's not waste any time because it's always a great experience when we have him on. Dr. Webster Tarpley is in the house. He's only going to be with us for a half hour tonight because Barack Obama is making an announcement at the top of the hour about his immigration thing that he just signed with his executive order. But who better to talk with about that than Webster Tarpley right there in Washington? Webster, welcome back and go for it. Let's
I just urge people from 8 o'clock on, Obama's going to be making this statement about immigration and his new executive order. And while I absolutely urge you to stay tuned to Tom's program now, because we're going to have Reverend Pinckney of Benton Harbor, Michigan, come on. And you got to hear that because he's threatened by a life sentence in jail. You can also just watch. I'll be sort of live tweeting some comments about Obama there from time to time. Look, I would say the most important starting point for this is, and the thing I think that's most widely neglected, is the issue of immigration for the United States in particular is a matter of building a labor force for the 21st century. And the ability of this country to be economically viable and to compete in the world depends on having such a labor force. Now, if you look around the world, you will see that there are many of the principal powers that have some kind or other of demographic crisis, right? You look at Russia, there the problem has been a decline in the life expectancy as a result of demoralization, vodka, God knows what. And Putin has done a lot to turn that around, but that's still a problem. In China, it's a kind of imbalance in the age profile of the people because of this crazy one child per family, right? Which they've tried to enforce, which has essentially it's skewed the whole demographics in a very strange way. In Japan, it's simply that the population is getting older and older. In the European Union, somewhat similar. Places like Germany, even Italy, surprisingly, these are places now with declining indigenous population. So you look at this picture, this is actually pretty heavy-duty stuff. The great advantage, the real trump card for the United States in today's world is that people from Latin America, Central America, but also Asia and elsewhere want to come here. And imagine if they wanted to go to Russia. We'd be having a debate about how could we attract immigrants. If they wanted to go to China, how could we attract them? What this shows you, the fact that does not happen, is that there is something good about the United States underneath all of this. And how much of this is an illusion based on past economic performance, which is no longer valid, you can speculate about that. But there's something attractive about the United States that people want. And therefore, we have to make sure that trump card is not thrown away by a bunch of redneck racists who are blinded by, I don't know what, their hate and fear of people who have a different language or a different religion. I don't know what this is, but it simply cannot be allowed. And the thing that we've heard about Obama's speech is he's going to say 4 to 5 million parents of legal kids. In other words, we have jus soli, right? The right of the soil. If you're born here, you're a citizen. That's it. That's the 14th Amendment. That's one of the things we fought and died in the Civil War to get. So don't tamper with that, but obviously keep those parents, right? They keep them in the country. Don't split families. That is simply barbaric. And if you keep doing that, eventually these people in Latin America will conclude that the United States hates Latinos and maybe others, and they'll go elsewhere. And maybe they'll go to Germany or who knows where. And then we will essentially be economically doomed to suffer the problems that these other countries have. I would say to Obama, drop the part of your program that says there's not going to be any food stamps, there's not going to be any Medicare, Medicaid. I guess Medicare is somewhat different, but he says no food stamps, no Medicaid, and no Obamacare. Look, this is stupid vindictiveness. You want to build a high quality, healthy, highly educated workforce for the 21st century. You want to assimilate people into the mainstream of employment as fast as you can. This is not an occasion to act out somebody's vindictive Calvinistic fantasies. This stuff is crazy. So you want them to have those benefits. You seriously want to have somebody in this country who can't get medical care, and we're in the age of Ebola? Are we nuts? The line of defense of humanity is the border of humanity. In other words, any human being has got to be defended against epidemics, because otherwise, as we've seen, they can spread them. And this we simply do not want. So my first point, therefore, can be summed up in this way. You better learn how to converse politely in Spanish, or you get ready to take orders in Chinese, because those are your choices. And therefore, I think that's a pretty clear choice. I would also point out that people from Latin America, especially, which they seem to attract the ire of these reactionaries today, this is Western civilization. My God, this is Spanish and Latin Christianity, right? If you had to assimilate, 5 million people who believed in widow burning, right? That the widow should be burned on the funeral pyre of the husband so she can serve him in the afterlife, right? That's a problem, right? In this case, we have no such problem, right? This is all within the bounds of Western civilization. I don't see what the big deal is. Now, the other thing is it illegal? I'm amazed to see people who they let Wall Street get away with murder. In other words, we've just had a decade or more of absolute illegality from Wall Street. Our whole system of politics is based on assassinations for which nobody is ever held responsible. And suddenly we've discovered the rule of law in regard to people who are helpless and persecuted. I think that is simply absurd. If you want to start having a society of laws and the rule of law, you better start in Wall Street and work down rather than start with these immigrants and then work yourself up. Now, in terms of what Obama is doing, I'm actually very pleased. I've been more pleased with Obama since this election than ever, because of course I was a very stringent early critic of Obama, right? And I tried to bash him as much as I could, as long as I could. But what we see is that as the wheels of history turn, Obama has been far surpassed in evil by these reactionary Republicans. Let's just go through a couple. I would focus today on United States Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, who has essentially threatened civil war. I guess that's the only way to put it. Coburn says if Obama goes ahead and does what he's obviously going to do, there will be anarchy and violence. Now, he says, of course, I'm concerned that there will be, but I know a threat when I see one. I hope you do too. He's threatening the United States with anarchy and violence from his crazed supporters, meaning the right wing of the Republican Party, meaning people, of course, who call themselves libertarians, right? I'm sure a lot of the libertarians will be interested in that statement. Coburn has to realize, right? He's protected by the speech and debate clause of the Constitution. In other words, it's hard to prosecute a senator, say, for something that he says, certainly in a debate on the Senate floor and in general. But if you start advocating the violent overthrow of the United States government, which seems to be what he's talking about, that gets you into the area of the Smith Act, which was used to put away, communists were put in jail with the argument that they were advocating the violent overthrow of the United States government. Here we have Coburn, and I don't know if you've seen Coburn lately, but he's sporting this beard. He looks for all the world like a bomb-throwing anarchist of the 19th century. The other one about him is he goes back and forth from Washington to Oklahoma all the time. And there is something called the Wrap-Brown law, right? If you cross a state line with the explicit purpose of inciting a riot, you have violated the Wrap-Brown law, right? And that might be also Senator Coburn. So he'll say, no, speech and debate clause. But if I were you, I wouldn't push it. Let me just mention that with this, Coburn joins what I call the Civil War caucus of the Republicans and their friends, right? Michael Savage has a book, The Radio Reactionary, or worse. He has a book about how a civil war is coming. Glenn Beck, the Mormon fanatic, has had a book about a statement with O'Reilly, I guess, that we're closer to a civil war than we've ever been since 1865. And I also have slightly different, not quite as extreme today as Ted Cruz. Right? Ted Cruz quotes one of Cicero's orations against Catiline, right? The famous Quousque tandem Catilina from one of Cicero's speeches, and he applies this to Obama.
Well, we're going to have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley just after this. Right back to it. Dr. Webster Tarpley on the show. Usually he's on for an hour, maybe hour and a half, but tonight he's going to have to bow out in about 15 minutes. So we'll get right back to him. Dr. Tarpley's talking about Obama's executive order. We're going to hear all about it from Obama in about 15 minutes or so. Webster, if I can get you right back to where you were. Now, typically this anti-immigration stuff is just red meat that the Republicans throw out there for their base, but they really don't mean it. They love immigration because it drives down wages and all. Is there a chance that there are new elements in the Republican Party that are taking this serious and there can actually be a split now?
I believe that with the potential of what Obama is doing is advancing towards what I regard as really essential for the United States. What we need for the United States is the destruction of the Republican Party as a group of racist bigots and reactionaries, right? Smash them up. They dwindle to some kind of southern or rural regional thing. And then we have to settle accounts with the Democrats. And with the Democrats, it is split the Wall Street Democrat majority from the New Deal labor populist minority. But that would then allow the New Deal populist minority to lead the country out of the crisis, because that is where the solutions are located. So with this immigration thing, Obama is exploding the inherent contradictions of the Republican Party. As you say, it's a Wall Street party that depends on racist yahoos, and that there is a contradiction because, as you say, the Wall Street perspective is flood the whole place with cheap foreign labor, use them as scabs, union busters, drive down wages, and so forth, right? But again, the thrust of what's happening tonight is tending to split the Tea Party fanatics away from the country club Wall Street people, and it's also splitting the donor class, the Koch and similar people, away from the Tea Party. So you can see you're driving in a big wedge. I hope Steve King carries the day. I want to see the impeachment of Obama. I want to see a total confrontation because it somehow Obama has gotten the idea that this absolute garbage he's been repeating year after year since 2007 about working across the island, bipartisanship, this absolute garbage. The Republicans have got to be smashed up. They're essentially a threat to the future of the United States and of world civilization. The quicker they go the way of the Federalists and the know-nothings, especially.
And the Whigs.
And the Whigs, yeah, but the know-nothings. Let's make them the know-nothings because that's really what they are. Now, having said that, the Wall Street people, in many cases, want to flood the country with cheap labor. Here are the safeguards that I propose about that. In other words, there's no doubt you need those people, right? So you start deporting them. That's national suicide. But once they're here, the new problems exist. Here's my plan: a $15 national minimum wage, right? Let's put a floor under everybody. Let's have a living wage. And if you're afraid that some newly arrived immigrant is going to undercut your wages, well, at least there's a $15 floor under that, so you can compete on the basis of merits. A 15% protective tariff that will force people to increase manufacturing in the country and not rely on cheap imports. And then the repeal of the Taft-Hartley law so that you can't have union-busting states, and there are now so many, right? The whole southern complex, but also Michigan, believe it or not, is now a right-to-work state. So the Taft-Hartley Act has to be repealed. So 15/15, $15 minimum wage, 15% protective tariff, and a TH for Taft-Hartley that gets repealed. So I'm all for this. The other question is the legality. Now, remember, obviously, this is an administrative question, right? The business about prosecutorial discretion, and they can deport who they choose to deport. This is, of course, true, but go to the heart of the matter. The Constitution starts off by telling you what the purpose of the U.S. government is, and one of the main ones is advancing the general welfare. The general welfare is up there with the common defense. Those are the two that get repeated twice, once as a purpose for the entire government and once as a purpose for the Congress in particular. So the general welfare, as soon as you say this, I hear the reactionaries chattering, it doesn't mean everybody goes on welfare. Yeah, you're right. It does not mean that. But then reactionaries tell me what it does mean, because it does mean something. And it means that there is a general welfare of the entire people that has got to be protected. Now, here's the thing. We have to go back to one of the greatest and perhaps one of the most neglected of the founding fathers. It is John Marshall of Virginia, who was appointed by John Adams as Chief Justice of the United States. And he was in there from 1801 to 1835. And the constitutional jurisprudence of the United States depends more on John Marshall than anybody else. And in particular, I would point to you on nights like this, McCulloch versus Maryland. Because you hear these guys saying, I heard Rush Limbaugh today, it's unconstitutional. Obama is shooting a BB gun at the Constitution. Look, the Constitution has the general welfare in the preamble and as a task of the Congress. It also has the enumerated powers, to be sure, but then it's got something called the elastic clause, right? That at the end of the enumerated powers, we get all laws necessary and proper. Now, let's expand that from the Congress to the activities of the president. Right? The president can act on the basis of the general welfare, and in an emergency. Are we not in a world economic breakdown crisis? Don't some people think that Japan almost collapsed over the last 2 weeks? Don't people see that Europe is going down, down, down? The United States is on very shaky ground. We are in a true state of economic emergency even today. So there's ample provision for that to happen, right? But the idea is that this is well within the purview of presidential administration of these various immigration laws, which we currently have on the books. Again, I think the principal fear that I have about it is it will be too tentative, too half-hearted, and will tend to incorporate these various the vindictive stuff. In other words, somehow you have to be punished because you came here. This is absolutely ridiculous. Let's put aside the narrow, crabbed, legalistic framework and start thinking about what do you need to have a really qualified labor force so you can compete with China and surpass them, beat them in the 21st century. And that it's going to depend on some of these 11 million people and some others. The other one I would warn against is this H-series visa business, right? The H-1B visa, I think, is abused. I think this is the hand of Zuckerberg and people like this. What they want is very cheap IT professionals, computer programmers.
It's been going on since Zuckerberg was in diapers.
Right, but we don't want to expand it, right? And again, I think, Tom, you got to grasp that something big is happening now tonight. This is a big deal.
I worked in IT right alongside of a lot of these H-1B people for
not just on that narrow front, but that this entire thing. The H-1B, I think, it's overdone. It should not.
It's bad news. It's bad news, period. There's plenty of Americans that could do those jobs.
Fine. I agree with that. I think he's obviously catering to this, Silicon Valley. Peter Thiel maybe asked him to do this. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But you get the idea. But the general principle that this kind of immigration is absolutely essential for a workforce. And I'm stressing the workforce because nobody talks about it. Nobody seems to have an idea that this is the underlying issue and that this workforce has got to have, yes, education, health, and so forth, so that they can go on and help the United States to meet the competition of these other powers who don't have the advantage that people want to go there. They just don't have it.
Well, are you there, Webster?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So All right, then. My main issue is, as always, this is the backroom deal is that the Republicans love immigration, but it's just another red meat thing they throw out to their base. Just like abortion, they love abortion. They want to bring the population down, and but they throw out the opposite. But you're saying now is an interesting time because some of these guys really believe it, and this could be a real fracture in the Republican Party. They're getting sick and tired of paying lip service to this kind of stuff. And they're going to try to drive the point home. Is that what we're looking at?
In other words, if you look at these 10 or 12 new Republican senators, the degree of fanaticism and insanity and rage is greater. You look at that woman, Joni Ernst, for example. If you thought Michelle Bachmann was an embarrassment, well, now you're going to see Joni Ernst, right? The hog castrator. She's a Koch. She's part of the Koch orbit. She already wanted to impeach Obama back in July. She ran on that. So good, let them do that. And obviously, it's a way to keep Obama honest because if the Republicans came in and said, "Look, let's have another free trade sellout. Let's have the Trans-Pacific Partnership and free trade with Europe," Obama would say, "Great." If they said, "Let's lower the corporate income tax from 35 to 20 and give more tax cuts to the rich," Obama would be for that. This is now the fact that he feels compelled for the survival of the Democratic Party and the survival of his own presidency to come out and do this finally. It means that a lot of these sellouts are going to be harder, right? Remember, the United States, there's an analysis, it's a book called The Pact, that Clinton was trying to sell out the U.S. to Newt Gingrich until Mademoiselle Lewinsky came along, right? So she saved the U.S. from the bipartisan sellouts that would have destroyed our economy even more than we've seen over the past 10 years or so. This time, it's the immigration question and the need to address it, and the fact that you can drive a wedge into the Republican Party. If you don't act, the situation is what you say, right? Wall Street wants one thing, the average Republican militant wants something else. You drive that wedge in there, you force that contradiction to explode, and that puts these Republicans, it accelerates their course to demographic doom. I want to see them come out raving against Hispanics, against foreigners. I want their racism and bigotry to hang out in every way. Let them discredit themselves. Let them try to impeach Obama. Let everybody be horrified and say, all right,